Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at Superclub and a few of its expansions. The Top 6 expansion, the Manager Kit, and the club cards for a specific club. Now I'm always on the lookout for a good football or soccer game, but I do find that they're hard to find. But when I saw this one, I was definitely intrigued. Then I saw they had my club, Chelsea, as an expansion. Oh boy, I knew I wanted to try this one. Now I often find that sports games like this one are going to go one of two ways. They're either going to be super complicated in trying to recreate what it's like to run a football club or any sports team kind of on a day-to-day basis, or they're going to take a much lighter approach where they focus on speed rather than accuracy. Now this one definitely takes the latter approach, but still keeps kind of what the core it means to actually run a club. You're going to be scouting new players, you're going to be training up your players, investing in infrastructure, and of course playing a season of matches. But they do it at a simplified but approachable manner. Now this doesn't always mean that makes a good game. So will this one be top of the league, or it's going to be back in the relegation zone? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back for my final thoughts on Superclub.
So here's Superclub set up. Now I'm only going to be showing one player's folder for this game. The main board is set up and all the appropriate cards are placed. Some of the decks are shuffled and some not. Now the game is split into a number of years, and each year into two phases. The off-season, where you'll be getting new players, training players, upgrading your stadiums, etc. Then the season itself, where you will be pitting your team against other players and against the game itself. At the end of each year, we check to see who won the season and then receive a Super Cup trophy. If a player gets 100 points or more during a season, they have won the game. Otherwise, if a player wins 3 Super Cups, they can try and beat the final team and win the game that way. At the beginning of every game, there will be a draft, where a number of cards will be dealt out and players will draft cards until each player has their starting 16. These are placed into your manager book. This book is where you'll manage your team. On the left is the players on the bench, along with up to 3 staff members. On the right side of the book is where you're going to be building your team. You have attackers, midfielders, defense, and a goalkeeper. All the players in your book, either on the bench or on the field, are called your squad. Each player also has a club pad with their training pitch, scoring card, and their stadium card. Each player also has 2 game pieces. One is to mark the strength of your squad, and one is to mark how many points you've earned during the year. Each year they'll both reset to the same position on the scoring track, because each year you'll look at all your stars on all your players in your squad and place your squad marker on that strength. Do not include your key staff, potential stars, chemistry, or captain boost, just fill the printed stars on the player cards. Each player also starts with 120 million. Now once the setup is done and players have a squad, we start off with the off-season. First you get finance, but in this first off-season this part is skipped, but in subsequent years you'll get income based on the position in your table you achieved last year. The better you did, the more money you get. Then you'll get money based on your stadium. Once you've collected your income, you need to pay 1 million for every star in your squad. So this is going to be skipped in the first off-season. You will then have the option to train your players. Depending on your training card, that will be the number of players you can attempt to train up. You can only train players who have potential, that is, empty stars on their player card. You need to roll 1 die and roll the number equal to the number of stars you want that player to reach. The number of stars you can add is also dependent on your training. So if you have the basic training card, you can only add a maximum of 1 star to any one player. If you are successful in training the player, take the corresponding card from the development deck. The current card will show you the number of where to find that in the deck. The next phase is the scouting phase. Depending on your scouting level card, you will draw that many cards from any of the continent cards. If you want to add them to your squad, you have to pay the scouting price of the card, which is located in the bottom right hand corner. If you don't want it, you just discard it. Once scouting is done, you go to investments. You have 2 mandatory actions you have to take this round. You can upgrade any of your cards, training, scouting, or stadium. You can also hire key staff. Draw 2 and hire 1 or none. You can only have 3 key staff members. If you hire a 4th, you discard an existing one. And finally, go to deadline day. Draw 1 card per player plus 1 and keep them face down. The starting player will flip 1 over and it goes to open bidding as a free-for-all. The starting price is in the bottom left corner of the card. Go through all the foreign players starting and ending with the starting player. Now you can only have 23 players in your squad. At any point you can sell players abroad for their scouting prices found in the lower right corner. Now this is the end of the off-season. Adjust your squad strength marker before the season begins by adding up all the stars in your squad as you did before. Now we move into the season itself. Now let's have a quick look at your squad. Now there are 4 different players in the base set. Green are attackers, yellow are midfielders, red are defense, and light red are goalkeepers. Each player will have a strength, which are the full stars, and some of them will have potential stars, which I talked about in training. And some will have a chemistry stars. If you put two players beside each other and complete a chemistry star, your squad gets an extra star. Players can also change their line, but take a half-star penalty for each line they cross. For example, you can put a midfielder as an attacker, but they will lose half of a star. Depending on the player count, the board will also show you how the matches will be played. Now, you're going to be playing 5 matches in total, but some of them will be against other players, and some of them will be simulated matches. Let's quickly go through how the player versus player match go. First, you'll pick the formation of your team, and there are 5 standard ones. For an example, 4-4-2. That means you have 4 players in defense, 4 in the midfield, and 2 attackers. Once both sides have created legal formations, you reveal your team. The match is now played in third. First, we go midfield versus midfield. Count up all your stars in the midfield, including any bonuses, chemistry, etc., and roll 2 dice. Whichever side has the higher amount wins that third and goes on the offense. Now, if it's a tie, it's a draw, but the home side is shown on the board and they're going to go on the attack. We then do it again, but this time it's going to be the attacker's forward against the defender's defense. Add up all the stars, roll 2 dice, and see who has the higher result. Now, if the attacker wins both, they will win the game and it stops. If not, go to the final third and do the opposite attackers versus defenders. If one player does not win 2 out of these 3 thirds, then the game ends in a draw. Points are then distributed based on the results. 6 points for a win, 2 points for a draw, and no points for a loss. Now if, when playing a match against another player, you roll doubles, you will either get an injury or a game changer. Whichever line you are rolling for, the player in the slot that matches the doubles you rolled gets injured. So if you roll double ones, the first player in that row will get injured, and you flip them over. If there's not a player in that slot, then you will get a game changer. These are either good or bad cards, and they will tell you when they are played. If you have to play a simulated match, simply roll 2 dice. Look at your squad's strength, and there will be a chart on the board which shows you the results based on the strength. Now once each player has played 5 matches, the season ends. The player with the highest point total gets to draw 1 Supercup card, but does not look at it. And based on the results, in the off-season, players will also collect their bonuses, which will show you how much bonus money you receive, and they'll also get a captain's boost, which can be assigned to 1 squad member before a match. Finally, we check if there is a game winner. If someone has scored 100 points or more during the season, they are the winner. Or if a player has 3 Super Cup cards, they can attempt to win the game. They randomly choose one of their previously won Super Cup cards and flip it over, and play a match against that team, using the normal player versus player rules. Captain boosts and game changers cannot be used during this final match. If they win the Super Cup match, they have won the game. If they lose all of their Super Cup cards and the game continues. If it ends up as a tie, they go into the penalty shootout where you'll be rolling dice for 5 of your best players, and another player will die for 5 players of the Super Cup team. Continue until you've rolled 5 times, or it is mathematically impossible for each side to win. And that's how you play.
So my final thoughts on this is going to be split into 2 halves. So first talk about the base game, then quickly show what's in the expansions and give you my thoughts on those. They don't change fundamentally the gameplay, but they do give you a few more options. So for the base game's theme and components, you know what? They hit the nail on the head with this one, especially on the theme. This feels like a football game, and almost all the mechanisms are tied back to that theme. And the progression of the round, the off-season to the regular season, makes perfect sense. The season itself is definitely simplified, and kind of feels like I'm actually playing a match, so top marks for the theme. For the components, they're fine. I'm not a big fan of paper money, but not sure how else you could have done this. And the player cards and board are pretty minimalistic, but they're perfectly functional. Now I do have a slight problem with this rulebook, and it might be that they put the theme in front of usability in some cases. For example, this is the setup page. From a football stance, it looks pretty neat. From a usability stance, not so much because the numbers are just all over the place. I also found some of the rules maybe not as clear, maybe not as logically placed as I would have liked. For example, during the kind of game components, it tells you here about your game pieces down here. And it says that you move your game piece up or down as you strengthen or weaken your squad. It then goes through all the steps of the off-season, which is great. But I do wish there's a reminder somewhere to say at the end of the off-season, oh, by the way, make sure your squad token reflects the strength of your squad. And there are a few other kind of little rules like that that you may miss because they're not maybe logically placed. So on to the gameplay. Now, I liked the gameplay. I enjoyed seeing the build-up to the season and seeing which players I might add to my squad. And playing the matches itself was entertaining for the first little while. For each step of the off-season, definitely all the players are vested in the outcomes. And there are rules, which I did skip over, which allow for some more player interaction. There's an option to buy unhappy players from other player squads. If I'm really low in the table and I have a bunch of very high-ranking players, then maybe another player who's much higher may want to kind of offer up some money for your top players. Now, there can be negotiations, but if you outright refuse to give up that player, then your player is actually going to sit out for the entire season and you can't use them on your pitch. Theme-wise, it's a nice touch. You can even offer up a player to sell to see if another player is willing to buy it from you, or you can always sell the player back to the bank to get some money. Now, I like the simplified matches that were played. Trying to figure out what lineup your opponent was going to use and trying to make sure that if maybe you had like a weaker defenders, that you stuffed your midfields and forwards so to try and win the match in the first 2/3. The matches were very quick and straightforward, which was nice, again, at the beginning. Another nice mechanism is the captain's boost, which I didn't go through in the overview. At the end of the season, you're going to be given a boost card that matches your position. It helps definitely with your finances, and it also helps a bit to bounce back the next season. If you were first, you get lots of money, but you only get 1 extra star for the next season. If you came second, you get 2 stars and a little less money. So the further down you are on the table, the less money you get, but you do get the extra stars. It's a little catch-up mechanism that doesn't feel too heavy-handed. Now, as much as I like the game, I do have some problems with it. The first is the game length and the feeling that the game kind of stalls in later on. Now, there's an option to do a quick game where everyone starts with 1 development. So you start with either an upgraded stadium, training pitch, or scouting. Plus, you get 1 key staff member. And you only require 2 Superclubs to pay in the final instead of 3. Now, this is definitely the way I would recommend playing, especially at the higher player counts. I found the game just drags on way too long. And once you have a fairly strong squad and your stuff is upgraded, the off-season seems fairly moot. If you scout and draw a few cards and none of them are better than your squad, you just discard them. Same with the upgrades. It says you have to do 2. But often you have key staff that you really like and you just end up kind of drawing 2 cards and discarding them right away. And there's nothing else to do in the off-season. And that leads me to my biggest problem with the game. I really wish there was some game progression, like different levels of players that only become available to you as you strengthen your squad. As you become a better team, you get access to better players. If I'm a newly promoted side, can I really buy all the 5 and 6 star players I want if they come on the market? This would have given the game a much better arc. If we're all top player, if everyone on the table is top contenders, none of us is going to be bidding on 1 or 2 star players. But if we're drawing off a deck where all the 5 and 6 star players are, then the bidding would be much more meaningful and that scouting would have been much more meaningful. And this would have helped with, for me, yet another negative. Just the sheer randomness of the game. I understand wanting to keep this game light and that dice rolls and card flips are going to be needed. But at some points, it just became either pointless because there was either no way I could beat another player or my squad was pretty strong as it was, or I just failed to drain my player, or the card flips that don't match the level of players that I currently have. Now, these aren't major game breakers for me, but they definitely take this game down a significant bit for me. And really, this lack of game arc, the players you get, and whatever else, it just feels the same from the first off-season to the last end of the season. This holds the game back from getting a high score, which is definitely unfortunate. So, would I recommend this game? Even with my reservations, I still feel I would. If you enjoy football and are looking for a quick, approachable game, this may be one you want to check out. Now, I really enjoyed the theme, how most of what you did in the game was definitely tied back to that theme. I enjoyed that the matches, although simplified, still gave me a little option to try and outwit my opponents by switching up my lines, but they're still resolved pretty quickly. I appreciated the doubles rule, and especially when they resulted in those game changer cards. They can definitely have an impact, both good and bad. I like that there was very little downtime around. Even when I'm doing individual actions in the off-season, they weren't overly long and I didn't feel like I was holding up the other players. I also liked how approachable the game was. If you're familiar with football at all, then the basic actions just make perfect sense. Those, scouting, training, upgrading, and then playing the matches. For the negatives though, the game is just too long, especially at higher player counts. Then you really need to implement that optional rule. And for me, they almost need to be switched. The longer game should be an option, not the shorter one. But my biggest negative is the stalling of the game due to lack of a game arc. I want, as my squad gets stronger, to have more options to me. I want to be able to try and recruit the best of the best when I'm scouting or fighting for that top flight player during the deadline day. Not keep on seeing 1 and 2 star players when I'm a league contender. It just makes the latter off seasons almost pointless, which is definitely unfortunate. The game also boils down to, a lot of the time, the luck of the dice or the luck of the card flip, and really no way to mitigate either one. And I'm okay with that if you play the shorter game. The longer game is just too random for a game for that length. Overall, though, I'm still going to recommend this one and give it a 7 out of 10 in the Dice Tower seal of approval. I think, for me, because my love of football, it probably pushed this game's rating up a bit in my ratings. Now, before I go, I did want to mention some of the expansion stuff you can get for it. The first is the top 6 expansion. Now, it does give you 2 more teams, the pink and the green team, so you can play with up to 6 players. It also adds utility players. They're kind of purple, and they can go on any line, forward, midfield, or defender, without any penalty. This expansion also adds what are called promising talent. They're 1-star players that have the potential to reach up to 6 players. Now, I don't care so much about the extra teams, but I do like these extra players, and they're just added to the regular deck. There's no rule changes, so adding them is pretty easy. Now, the last expansion I want to talk about is the manager kit and the club cards. For many clubs in the leagues around the world, you can get an officially branded expansion. The manager kit will have the manager's folder. It's got the little markers, all with your team's logo on it. It also comes with specific stadium cards that are linked to that club. Now, in conjunction with that, you can also buy the player cards for that season. Here I have the 2022-2023 season for Chelsea. It has cards for the squad that year, plus it has several legend cards, which is what I really like. Got Di Matteo, you got Terry, Lampard, Ashley Cole. Now, these player cards are probably the one expansion I would get for the game. It's nice having these players from the other expansion, and being able to upgrade your Stamford Bridge is cool. But being able to scout actual, Chelsea legends into my squad was probably the most fun. Although they didn't have my favorite Chelsea player, it's nice to have these legends. And that's kind of a quick look at some of the expansions. And that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.